Hello, everybody. This is Mike Bellbauer coming to you from the Flag the Voice podcast studio. And today on the Road to Recovery podcast, we have in the studio some special guests, as I always say, because all my guests are special. But today we have Robert, who has been with us, I think, 4 other times. This is his 5th time and is going to continue to be with us on a regular basis, and I'm thankful for that. And today, Robert has a gift. So, Robert, would you introduce your guest?
I'd be happy to. Mike, thanks for having me back. One of the things that has kept me sober for 39 plus years is sharing the message of recovery with other people. And one of my favorite people on the planet is Krystal. and I thought she'd be great to have in studio, not because so much as Krystal's my friend, but Krystal just celebrated 1 year of sobriety last week. And what I wanted to talk about today, Mike, Krystal, is how you and I are doing the same thing. We might be doing it in a different way or a different level, but we're doing the same thing to maintain our recovered status and this new way of life that we've chosen. And I wanted to hear you share with our audience what that's like and how important being a newcomer is, but yet you're doing the same thing that us old timers do as well. So, Krystal, introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Krystal. I'm so grateful to be here today. It is a pleasure, and I'm very grateful. Some of the people that God has placed in my life, right, to guide me right through this program and life. I couldn't have done it without you guys, especially you, Robert. You're a big part of my recovery. Like you said, you're my friend. And we are doing the same things. I'm not, maybe not at your level yet, but it's been a real game changer for me to be able to interact with you, right? To understand, how the program works, how recovery works. And, I've been blessed with an amazing sponsor. And, the things that I'm doing right is all right there in the book. Right, the solution was there the whole time, and it was people like you that helped me find it. So basically, like I said, we are doing the same thing. No one has failed who has thoroughly followed this path, right? This path has not changed. It was the same, 100 years ago. AA's 90 years old. It's not changed. The first 100, right? That you always say to me, take it up with the first 100, right? Don't be mad at me. Take it up with the take it up with the first. But the crazy thing is that it works, and and it gives us these things to do, right? These few simple rules, right, that we have to follow. And it's just as important, right? I can't imagine being, because sometimes you outgrow things, right? And you hear the same things. You would think that a person would feel dull inside, right? You always need to grow spiritually. And this program talks about that, enlarging your spiritual territory. Our program is contingent on our spiritual maintenance, right? And, the action steps that you talk about, 10, 11, and 12, right? Living out of those. And I think that's very important, right? And nothing ensures immunity from drinking than intensive work with another alcoholic. Just something happens when you're sharing your experience, right, with life and alcoholism or addiction. Something happens, something transpires, right? That just, it's like God intervenes, and a person. If I have a police officer come to me and say, well, you have a drinking problem, right? And you need to do this and you need to do that, or I'm going to put you in jail, right? Versus, hey, this is what happened to me. This is what was going on in my head, and this is what I did, right? And that's basically,
They told me when I first got in, I got sober in Las Vegas, as you both know, back in 1986. And Las Vegas is considered the relapse capital of the world. And they told me that the program of Alcoholics Anonymous is like a giant wrench that'll fit any nut who walks in. Right. And that's hilarious to me to this day. And that's important to remember, because what was told to me was the same thing that was told to those who told me. And when I meet someone like Krystal, I'm not telling her something that's new that I've had to invent, that I've had to come up with, or I had to read some other book to say, okay, Krystal's here. Boy, what are we going to do for her? I just give her the same tools that I've been given and the same guidance that I was given, in hopes that she comes along and she's serious about her condition, as I was serious about mine and others were serious about theirs. Then she could have what I have. Zig Ziglar says, if we do what we're supposed to do when we're supposed to do it, there'll come a time where we can do what we want to do when we want to do it. And earlier we were talking, and Kristal, you were mentioning the freedom from bondage, the freedom from self. Talk about that freedom, even as a person who's been sober a year, coming up through drug court. What has that freedom meant to you?
The freedom, let's see. Okay, so, I can still have the same thoughts that I had while I was using, right? But it's what I do with them. It's so funny because this program has taught me to pivot my emotions, right? It's taught me how to walk through things and not run from things. But the freedom that I believe that's the alcoholism part, right? It's not just being free from the substance, right? It's freeing internally, right? I can wake up happy, joyous, and free today. I'm not caught up on one situation for all day long for a whole week and just ruin my whole week myself, and then I start to react, right? And then I'm like, screw everything, and go the opposite direction. I'm done with this, right? This program helps me to live and walk through, and that's really freeing, because before I'm like, you got a court date, oh, I ain't showing up, or you need to show up for this is an important matter here, or you have this health issue or this or that, and totally just ignore it all, right? And that's what the substance did to me. It took away any of my morale. I went totally against my morale, right? Incomprehensible demoralization to the full extent. And I was just doing things, right? Like we were talking, I can't get my heart to match up with my actions. My actions was way off
your
from,
intentions,
right? Or my intentions, and
because you didn't want to hurt those people that you've hurt along the way.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
You love them,
right? And when I would tell them, when I would look at my son, I would say, I'm not gonna drink again, and I meant it. I meant it 150%. But somehow, when I would pick up that substance, because of all the turmoil that I had inside, that was the solution. And that's, like we said, I would go out on Friday and be home on Wednesday. Yeah. And I'm like, where'd my days go? Days on days on days. And like, what happened to the year? You think one day and it ends up being 4 years, and that's the insanity of it. So I think that freedom, right? That freedom from self, the freedom from that obsession, that overwhelming urge to use, and that physical allergy, just the freedom from that, because that's what really, how do I say that, enhances my spiritual malady, right? That spiritual disease that I got going on inside of me. So I think that's very important.
I think if I remember, Robert, and I think it was you that said this, when you're talking about different parts of freedom that you didn't have, that you now can have if you like it. I think you were talking about being up on the highway and you looked in the rearview mirror and there was a sheriff's car.
Yeah.
And there was at this time now of your being in recovery.
I was almost pissed off he didn't pull me over, Mike.
Yeah. He said, this is what it used to be. Yeah. Now I don't have to worry about that.
Right.
Okay. And if for any reason he pulled me over, it wasn't going to be because I was drinking.
Right.
Okay. I was free.
Yeah.
The fear of that. And freedom is the opposite side of fear.
You bring up something really great, and thank you for remembering that. That story from last time we got together. That was so neat. And not that I wanted to get pulled over,
right,
but in the case I did, I was saying, okay, I have a handgun here, I have a handgun there. Here's my current driver's license.
Yeah.
Here's my current insurance. Here's my registration. I'm not wanted by the law. I didn't have to think, oh gosh, do you have wants and warrants out for me? Am I late on my child support? Am I,
Right.
all these things are in alignment. And it was like the first time, Mike, Krystal, I was waved through a checkpoint, a sober checkpoint. I remember back in 1988, I was living in Fullerton, California, Brea, and I was leaving my restaurant about 3 a.m, and they had a sobriety checkpoint. And the fact that I was sober as a judge. Matter of fact, most judges weren't as sober as I was.
We're not going to get in that conversation.
Right.
And they waved me through, and I was pissed off. I thought the one time I could go by a sobriety checkpoint and be sober, you tell me to go on through. If I was drunk, you'd pull me over to the sides, and and we laugh and we joke about those things, but that's how our life was. Today, having that freedom and that knowing that we're okay. And it's really important, Krystal. We all get to the point where it says in the Big Book of Alcoholics, and by the way, we're not a spokesperson for Alcoholics Anonymous. Right. We just happen to be members of AA. It says here on page 44, most of us have been unwilling to admit that we were real alcoholics. No person likes to think that is bodily and mentally different from his fellows. And it talks about if we honestly cannot quit once we start. How important was that to you? Because a friend of mine, Mike, said one time, and Krystal, you can relate to this as well, not every time I was drunk did I get in trouble, but every time I was in trouble, I was drunk.
Right.
Where did that cross for you? Where did that inability to control your drinking, when did that start to bleed over to how unmanageable your life had become? Does that make sense?
Yes. So I think that something that you read there is very important for me, right? I could never move forward with anything because that is the one thing that I could not accept, right? Being different. Oh, like I am not an alcoholic. Like I would get in, I'm not raising my hand and I am not saying I'm an alcoholic. I never, you can't fix something you can't see, right? And I couldn't see it. I couldn't see it until I, many countless vain attempts, right? Being in jail, sober as can be and suicidal. That was another, there were so many things that played into that. I was not able to move forward with my recovery until I was able to admit that, right? Until I could fully to my inner self admit that and say, which placed me in that position of surrender, right? To say, okay, I need help and I'm going to be quiet and listen to what you have to say now. Because before, we were talking, going in there and just treating the program, I'm not going to do this. Oh, I'm definitely not sponsoring nobody. I'm not sharing anything. I wouldn't say anything. I would go in these meetings and I would just sit, right? And I would listen to these people and I'd be like, oh my God, they're like, this is a cult. I hated it. I hated it, especially women meetings. But I would they just cry, and I can't stop crying. It was like, just where my mind was, my perception of things, right? So I was not able to move forward and get out of the way and let someone else, like Robert and my sponsor and other people and the judge and the SMART program and other people move in to help me. I mean, even when I was still in the SMART program, which I'm not sure if people are familiar with that. It's a substance abuse mental health program they have in the jail. It is an amazing program. I think it beats, after my experience with different treatment centers and working in that field, it is an excellent program. I mean, it is blessed. It is a blessed program. But being in there, I still had not conceded to my innermost self, right? That I had an issue, that I had a problem, that I was suffering internally and mentally. It was like, I knew everything and I'm going to overcome this, right? By myself, on my own. I don't need nobody's help. But I would listen, right? But I really felt that way. Like, God's got me. Well, you got to get out of the way for let God to move, right? So, it wasn't until after I got out, didn't do this program thoroughly, right? I didn't thoroughly follow his path. I didn't take any direction. I did what I wanted to, and the things I wanted to do that I was told to do, maybe I would do it, and I was reading, I was doing my morning, meditation, spending time with God, but that's about it, and, but I wasn't able to move forward past that until that paragraph you just read is extremely important for me.
We all get to that point where we had that spiritual experience. And Mike, you're big on this, and we are as well, a relationship with a higher power, God, Vishnu, whatever you want to call your higher power is okay by me. It's because it matters what your higher power does, not who your higher power is. And so, Krystal, you brought up some interesting point. On page 30, we had to concede to our innermost self that we were alcoholic. This is the first step in recovery. And in the beginning, I was afraid to concede because I didn't want you to think, because conceding means honesty. And I couldn't be honest with you because if you knew who I was and where I was at and what I did and who I did it with, you wouldn't like me. And if one other person did not like me, and AA was the last house on the block, where was a person like me going to go?
Right.
And so I made the active decision to go drink. But you know what? I realized the unmanageability of my life when I ended up in a hotel room, faced with being homeless and no longer being able to quiet the madness. Right. And I sat there drinking, trying to go through life sideways again, and I couldn't do it. And I thought, my life has never been more unmanageable. Maybe I really am an alcoholic. Because I heard you talking and raising your hand as an alcoholic, and I would raise my hand on a cursory standpoint because I wanted to sound like you and be like you and maybe be accepted like you were accepting me, but yet I wasn't being honest because I really didn't think I was alcoholic. And then I sat in that room. Well, I thought I was alcoholic, but I didn't think my life was unmanageable. I didn't think I was as bad as the next person until I sat up in that hotel room and I realized then and there, maybe I am. Maybe I am that person that just needs help. And my Krystal, the only place for me to go on April 25th, 1986 was back to the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous because I knew that there was a group of people who, in spite knowing everything about me, would say, keep coming back. And that was a real groundbreaking for a person like me because I just wanted you to accept me. Do you remember feeling like that?
Yeah, I used to go into these meetings and I would still feel out of place for the longest. I mean, you did much better than me because if you left me alone in a hotel room, I would just drive myself deeper. I would never think to go to Alcoholics Anonymous then.
Go back
to Alcoholics Anonymous. It's always taken, long, to get stopped. Someone's had to stop me. Marchman Act, Baker Act. I've done it all. And being arrested, right? Right. And that's been a big thing for me. But I felt very out of place even coming in there because, like I said, I'm not in the right place. I'm not an alcoholic. I don't need to be here. They just say that's where I need to be. So I would, go there a little bit. People would try to get me to go. Just to appease them. But it wasn't until this past year that I really felt I was in the right place. Mm-hmm. Like I knew some people in AA and I loved them and they were cool and I'd hang out, we'd go eat and stuff like that. But really, did I really feel like I was in the right place, right? I didn't understand what was going on with me. I didn't understand the program. I didn't understand what alcoholism was. I didn't know what that really looked like. I didn't know, what I was suffering from. I refused to read and I didn't, I wasn't doing what was suggested. And I kept myself separated, right? It was me.
You bring up something very profound. And Mike, you can relate to this as well because you found your way, you found your home. And Krystal and I have as well. I don't remember the exact date and time, what meeting was at, but there came a moment when I walked into the rooms of recovery and I realized I didn't have to go anywhere else to get everything I ever wanted. And I've stayed for 39 years. I've stayed. When did you make that transition, Krystal, when you realized that everything you ever wanted to be was going to be found in the rooms?
And that was actually just probably about, I would say, probably about 6 months ago when I came in contact.
Tell us about that.
I came in contact with my sponsor. And then I met you, right? Like we both decided to go to this weird meeting I never go to. Someone just told me to go. There was like 8:00 at night. I'm like, I need to go to a meeting. So I show up at this meeting and I meet Robert. And between him and my sponsor, and really I started going to these meetings with Robert because he doesn't, know a whole lot of meetings here yet. And I'm like, okay. And he's making it fun. So I'm like, I'm going to go hang out with this guy. Right. And, in the stuff that he's saying, right. It's like, I'm hearing what he's saying. And, I'm hearing my sponsor and, and learning about what recovery really looks like, right? Because I was telling you that, I thought I came here for an external purpose, right? To stay out of jail. And I came here because I needed a better job. And I came here because I know I'm apparently have a alcohol and addiction, I'm drinking, once I start drinking, I'm off to the other stuff. And I thought I came here for that, right? And I came here for an internal purpose. And I didn't realize that till later. So when I started to see how, and read the book and listen and take direction and see how real it was, right? You guys made it, you wasn't promoting it, right? Like you got to go to AA because these things are going on. It was, you never said that you shared your experience, right? And you started to educate me, right? And now I'm doing the traditions with my sponsor. We're going through these traditions and I'm learning about the program. I'm like, wow, like this is a miracle, right? Like this whole program is created from a miracle, from a phone call. Like that's a miracle, right? And I'm starting to learn these things. So, it helped me to really, like, people say that if you come and you're going to meetings and you don't get it and you keep coming, you'll eventually fall in love with it. And that's what happens when you get to know, it's like a person, you start hanging out with a person and you begin to learn who they are, you fall in love with them, right? Your significant, your wife or, whoever it may be. But that's what happened for me is, the people, like I said earlier, when the student or when the student is ready, the teacher appears. But, I had these people just placed in my life that just, made it so attracting and it's just so much fun. And,
Well, that's really great. And, but I also know that both Robert and I had a moment.
Yeah.
Okay. My addiction was not alcohol or drugs. It was cigarettes.
Yes, sir.
I was a 2-pack-a-day smoker. Okay. And nicotine, we know scientifically, is harder to give up than most any other drug on the market. Period. Right. And I had quit 6 times and relapsed 6 times. But then finally, there was something that came up that I needed to hang on to because I knew it was no good for me, but I was addicted to it. But something came up and gave me what I needed. Now, that was 43 years ago. I'm going maybe close to 44. Robert tells the story, and I think it was the last time you went, when your dad dropped you off at the hotel.
At the hotel.
and that was a key for you to make that final step to really get serious about admitting the problem was there, because, again, you have to admit. And then we all need something different. I'm not sure what the triggers can be bad. They can put us back, but you can have a trigger that puts you going the right way too.
Right.
And what's that trigger for everybody is not the same thing.
Right.
Okay. What you go through once you get that trigger, once you make that decision, once you have admitted that you have that problem, then we all go forward with very similar things. Right. Now, of course, cigarettes didn't have an AA or an NA. Right. We had to do more of it on our own. But it was following it. When I read the steps now, what I did was a lot of it was still the same things.
Right.
Okay. But getting that time that it's triggered you. Did you have one moment that got you to make that final step?
Did I have one moment? Well, yeah. I had a significant period of clean time, and again, I picked up, and I couldn't. I'm like, how did my life go from this to this that quick? I'm like right back to where I was when I was really crazy. You know what I mean? In like 3 days. And there was, and I was in jail, and I'm sober, and I'm suicidal. I couldn't understand, like, how do I get myself out of this mess? Like, my greatest thought was, okay, just let me die. I'd rather just, and that right there, that's when I knew. I'm like, hey, I'm like, I need, and it wasn't that I was sure. It was just that what people kept saying, right? So there was something there. I knew, like, when I went to, like, the program, like, things got better in my life a little bit, even though I wasn't working the steps. So I was like, that was, something. So when I was in jail, I'm like, oh man, I need to get a sponsor, I think. Right. That's what happened. And I called someone and they were willing to, sponsor me. And I just started doing the stuff, I just started reading, and then, of course you enlarge, right? You do more, and you learn more, and you grow more. And that's what started happening for me. Right. And, so that's when I finally made the decision, when I couldn't get myself out of the hot seat for no longer than, my goodness, but the thing is, I could be sober and still get myself in the hot seat. Right.
It's interesting. We had this conversation out in the foyer, talking to another person. Usually what happens is, when you're in front of the judge, when you're trying to convince your significant other not to change the locks, right. When you're trying to, which happened a lot of times on the way to 2 divorces, though I'm not proud of, but it's part of my story. Or Mike, you recounted the time when my dad dropped me off and said, your mother and I aren't going to watch you die. That was traumatic. To this day, it invokes such an emotional response. My dad has been dead for years, but that never left me. His hopelessness that he felt toward his own son, who was named after him. And so whether we're standing in front of a judge, or our dad says something to us, or a loved one, or an employer, as soon as that heat is off, we have a tendency, human nature, we revert back to previous behavior. And it's interesting, in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, which we follow, our description of the alcoholic, the chapter to the agnostic, and our personal adventures before and after make clear 3 pertinent ideas. A, that we were alcoholic and could not manage our own lives. B, that probably no human power could have relieved our alcoholism. And C, that God could and would if he were sought. That's where we stop reading. But the sentence after that is so important. It says, being convinced, we were now at step 3, which is that we decided to turn our will and our life over to the care of God as we understood him. Just what do we mean by that, and what do we have to do? Krystal, tell us when you became open-minded to become willing to believe, because in step 2, we become open-minded to a power greater than ourselves. In step 1, we admit we are powerless over alcohol, that our life had become unmanageable. That's our honesty. But being willing, how important was that for you in your sober journey that's lasted over a year in a row, which is very important.
Right. Consecutive days, no mind alternative, right? Not weekends,
yeah,
right?
Not weekends and holidays,
right.
In a row. How important was that to you to become at least willing? Now, I know your life with God is a lot different than what it was when you're a newcomer, but you had to become willing at some point to say, maybe if there is a God, maybe he could help a person like me.
Right. I believe that, the Spirit moves, right? He moves to other people.
Because you had to become convinced.
Right. So it was basically, it started out with the little bit of willingness, right? And I believe, I say this all the time, if you're willing, God is in the making happen business, okay? And he is. And, I became willing. Like I said, I didn't really understand. I didn't know what surrender really looked like. I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know. I thought I was surrendered, but it totally wasn't, especially when I'm saying what I'm going to do and what I'm not going to do. But, in step 3, I started to take direction, right? Mm-hmm. I let other people guide my life. These simple rules, right? God, through the book, through others. I moved myself out of the way. And step 3, it talks about that. It talks about being caught up in self and, selfishness, self-centeredness, that was the root of our troubles. And, I got that new employer, right, with God. Yeah. And if I kept close to him, performed his work well, he'll provide what I need. And I started to believe that little by little. And I would get all these situations thrown at me, right? And I seen how my perception was different. I was not looking at things the same. I wasn't reacting. I was responding. And, I had something tragic happen to me in May, and I didn't even realize till afterward. I'm like, oh my gosh, I just had like the hugest spiritual experience. I'm like, I didn't even want to use, I didn't even want to drink, I didn't want to get crazy, I didn't, none of that. And I was like, that right there, when I became just a little bit willing, my willingness grew and grew and grew, and I just started to step into the program more, right?
That's important, because one of the things, Mike, that I wanted to point out today is that a person like Krystal, with a year and a week of being sober, and in the 39 years, we're doing the same thing, because I'm willing every day in step 11. Right. Step 11 is sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious I have to be willing every single day, just like you have to be willing every single day to improve that conscious contact with God, praying only for the knowledge of His will for us and the power to carry that out. So we're doing the same thing. There's a lot of time between us, but we're doing, so a person who's coming after us, that newcomer in the room, they're not getting a mixed message. Well, Krystal did it this way, and Robert did it this way, and so on did it that way and that way. Matter of fact, the other day, I had lunch with a friend the other day, and I thought I'd said something to offend them. Now, step 8 and step 9 are the amends steps in recovery. And I thought maybe I said something that would seem offensive to this person. So I called them up and I said, I play back every conversation I ever had. And I seen that what I said, although it wasn't intended to offend you, may have offended you. And this person said, I was offended, and I'm glad you brought it up. And I was able to make amends to that person then and there. So we tell you to make amends, but I'm still making amends to people as well. So we're doing the same thing. And I want the audience to understand we're doing the same thing to maintain the sobriety we've been given. Talk about that real quick before we cut off today.
The program, it talks about that. Thoroughly follow this path with, this lack of power, simple rules laid out, right? We all need these things, right, in order to thrive in our sobriety, right, in our recovery in life, right, learning how to live life on life's terms. And, it doesn't change. Yeah. It doesn't change. The steps have been the same. They're not going nowhere. It's the same thing, like you said. And people don't know it. And I think that's so cool. And I hope I don't ruin this for nobody, but you come here, you don't even know that this book is about God, right? You don't even know you come here for an eternal purpose, for a relationship with a higher power. And it's so slick, like how they do it, man. They reel people in. I hear people come in and they're like, oh, I don't believe in God. And they have this big resentment against God. And then like 6 months later, they're like raising their hand like, dude, you know what God did for me today? And it's just like, right? It's so funny how they, right? It knows how that's so funny. So it's the same thing, right? And that's the thing. Your alcoholism, it's just like when you have a disease, you have to, that's treatable. You treat it, right? And if you stop taking the diabetic medication, something happens, right? Yeah. And it's the same thing for us. So I think that's why it's important, right? Contingent on our spiritual maintenance, the action steps to live these things out daily, because our mind, right? Alcohol is a subtle foe. It can come back and it looks like depression and loneliness and all these things, right? That we don't know how to manage on our own, right? We gotta have some direction. We're undisciplined, right?
So whether you're 1 year or 39 years, we're doing the same thing, hoping for and expecting the same result.
Right.
Correct?
Right. Correct.
That's the message for today, Mike.
I think it's a great message. I'm gonna interject something a little bit at the end that we talked about prior, and that when we look at these 12 steps, okay, and as Kristal said, they all come from the Lord.
Yes.
They all come from Scripture. And Kristal mentioned off air before, or I should say on air when I didn't hit the right button, so we weren't recording it, that these steps can be used for anybody. You don't even have to be involved with addiction.
Right.
They're good, solid steps for life.
Right.
And if we start looking at that as the general public, that what you're doing is you're learning how just to get back into a normal, everyday life guided by God.
Right.
And that's the key for everybody out there. That's what I believe. You can believe what you want to believe, but that's what I believe. So everybody, I want to thank you all for being with us today. This has been an exciting time. far more exciting than you all know about. Mostly because of the mistakes I was making with the controls here. And we're looking forward to having you back again in the near future. Krystal, anytime you want to come back, you're certainly welcome.
Thank you for having me. It was a
we're
pleasure.
We're happy to have you with us and go from there. So, Mike Feldbauer, Flagler County Drug Court Foundation, coming to you from the Flagler Voice podcast studio, saying, have a great day.